Energy Transition, episode 27. The topic today is How Ugly is Shale? It's a pleasure having Irina Slav and David Blackmon. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Dry shale gas production in the US is more than 2 billion cubic meters per day. Only for comparison, Europe imported 25% of this volume per day from Russia in 2021. Oil companies are accused of generating pollution, making huge profits, delaying the energy transition. After all, how ugly is shale, David, please?
Well, I think it's instructive to remember that it was just 2 years ago that all companies were accused and were in fact making huge losses, and nobody complained when the price of gasoline went to $1.79 here in the United States, and everybody was fat and happy except for the oil companies. So now they're making some profits and everybody's complaining. And yes, you're right. It's just kind of the cycle for this industry here in the United States, and it has been for a long, long time, really since its founding. You go through these booms and busts. We're in a boom time right now to some extent, and the politicians and the industry's critics are upset, as they always are, because when the industry is making profits, because they seem to think that these big corporations are in fact some sort of social program for them to exploit and for them to direct how to spend their profits. And the oil companies have been under tremendous pressure for 15 years from the ESG investor community to stop spending money on drilling and direct their profits to higher returns for investors. And unless they're going to spend their profits on windmills and solar panels. These are oil companies. That's not what most of them do. Shell and BP make a big show of, taking a rounding error from their capital budgets to do those things. But most are in the oil business and will always be. So, yeah, I mean, this is just the kind of thing, if you're going to be in the industry, it's the kind of negative public attention you have to deal with. And, I think Irina wrote a brilliant piece about all of this week that I want to turn it over to her to talk about.
Yeah, drillers don't want to drill, is it correct, Irina?
Yeah, drillers do not want to drill, and you can't make them unless you force them to at gunpoint, which I don't see happening right now yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah, not yet, but you never know. It seems that politicians and ordinary people commenting on Twitter, they're using pretty much the same style of attacks. It appears that it is wrong for a business to make a profit if that's an oil business. It's perfectly fine for big tech or big pharma to make fat profits, even if they're making these profits on the back of consumers. But if it's the oil industry, that's criminal. They should be taxed. They should be. Someone on Twitter even suggested that they're banned from having profits. I don't know how this could happen, but it tells you a lot about the mental frame of quite a lot of people, actually. It seems like, David, I think you posted a cartoon that they can't get it right, the oil industry. Damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Right.
It really has come to that, because on the one hand, it is obvious that the US needs more oil to bring prices of fuels down. But on the other, this administration is so very pro-green, it can't exactly, cheer the oil industry. It's kind of humorous to watch it. But really, as one hedge fund manager who I quoted in my piece said, why would you do anything to people who hate you? And
Right.
really, this hate is not too strong a word. I mean, politicians, Democrat legislators keep on, pouring scorn on the oil industry. On the one hand, because they are reaping the benefits of less supply of oil in the world, and on the other, because they're not producing more oil, which these same people do not want the oil industry to do because it is compromising the energy transition. Now, if I was an oil driller, I will do exactly what oil drillers are right now doing. I will be careful with production growth. In fact, to be fair, production growth is a fact in the US. It's just that
Right.
production is not growing as fast as those same pro-green politicians and officials wanted to grow. So we're in the realm of the ridiculous firmly. And if those windfall taxes become a reality, which is not out of the question, who knows? It is already a reality in the UK. That would be further motivation to drill, do they think, with this? It will not be a motivation to drill. It will motivate companies to spend even less on production growth. But it seems nobody has thought this through.
Right.
They're improvising on a big scale.
Yeah, and the point about the hate that you mentioned a minute ago, it isn't going too far to say that it's hate rhetoric. I had a conversation with a former Democratic congressman about a year ago who called me out of the blue to talk to me about a piece I had written in which I made a similar point about the Democratic Party. And, he began to lecture me about, nobody in the Democratic Party hates the oil and gas industry. We just want it to behave differently. And he went into this long discussion about that. While he was doing it, I Googled some of his quotes from when he was in office. And this fellow was from Michigan, and he had said some of the most heinous things while he was in office and while he was running for re-election. And when he finished, I reminded him, I read off some of the quotes that he personally had said about the oil and gas industry. And his response was, well, that's just politics. And I said, well, imagine if you're an accountant or a secretary or whatever your job is at an oil and gas company, and your life depends on this job, your standard of living, your ability to feed your family and clothe your kids depends on this job. And they hear you and other members of the Democratic Party accuse these companies of, he had literally said the industry was evil. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, a lot of heated rhetoric gets thrown around in a political campaign. And I said, well, okay, but it gets thrown around by members of your party. I never hear Republicans saying these things. And not only do that, I never hear Republicans saying these things about the oil and gas industry. I never hear Republicans making statements like this about the industry's opponents, like the Sierra Club, because they know if they were to say anything like that, they would be lambasted by the news media. And this is part of the big problem in the United States, is that our news media is on one side and only criticizes one side. And so these Democratic politicians get into office, or they run for office, and they think they just have freedom to say anything they want to say and smear any business, any sector of the economy they don't like, because they know there's not going to be any political price to pay. So to him, it was just politics. And I know that's their attitude because I've dealt with folks just like him for 30 years. But it's really a bad dynamic just in terms of being able to make good policy. And we see that with this Inflation Reduction Act bill that's now about to be approved by the House of Representatives. It's an awful bill that's going to have horrible impacts on major parts of our economy. And it's going to create another round of massive inflation in and of itself. But the Democrats feel free to do this, do bills like this, and hire 87,000 new IRS agents because they know they have no political price to be paid for doing it. The news media is not going to report it accurately, and nobody in the public's going to really know what's in it until it hits them in their pocketbook. So a big piece of this is just that dynamic that happens in our country. And I think it's a similar dynamic in Europe and probably in Brazil as well, where the news media takes a side. And so
one side
that's right. And that side knows there's no political price to be paid for inflaming the public and using rhetoric like this.
Is a pathology, social pathology.
Yeah. It is. It certainly is. And, it affects not just the energy sector, but really
Everything.
every aspect of public policy in the Western world. And it's just a terrible dynamic.
Irina, please, what's your opinion? What's the difference between mining for metals of solar and wind energy compared to shale production?
In terms of environmental impacts, I suppose you mean.
Yeah.
Well, I'm neither a professional driller or a professional miner, but from everything that I have read about both industries over the past 10 years or so, I wouldn't say their impact on the environment is all that different, because one of the big arguments against shale oil in particular is the use of toxic chemicals and the increased danger of seismic activity, which the USGS has attributed in a paper to not just the process of fracking itself, but underground reservoirs for wastewater.
Yeah.
But mining, as far as I know, at least mining for gold, also involves a lot of toxic chemicals. The processing of the ore, rather. But tailings dams, they contain waste matter, waste fluids that are toxic. In Brazil, a few years ago, there was a devastating breakage of a tailings dam, that killed people and got the whole village, razed it to the ground. So, the energy transition is not very mild on the environment either, because, as we know, mining as activity will need to be stepped up hugely to supply all the metals needed for the transition. And this means a lot more tailings dams. I wrote about it a while ago, I think, when I was doing that piece about copper. And apparently there are some companies working on technologies that could eliminate the need for, dumping wastewater, waste chemicals, waste matter into tailings dams. But they're just beginning. So this will take time. It's not standard practice. So we're looking at more mining equals more waste matter into tailings dams, higher risk of breakages, because they do happen, and higher use of toxic chemicals. So really, when it comes to environmental impacts and dangers, I don't see shale well drilling as being also different to mining, to be honest. But again, I'm not a specialist. I'm sure specialists could be a lot more, specific than I am. But from my perspective, both are, invasive technologies for taking natural resources out of the ground.
Perfect. And they think the same, different things?
Oh, sure. And she talks about the dam breakages. We had a famous incident in the United States during the Obama administration when the EPA was actually inspecting the tailings dam at I can't remember if it was a coal mine in northern New Mexico. And what they were doing caused the dam to burst. And it turned, yeah, they were doing an inspection, but they were doing some sort of invasive technique to test the soil, and whatever they did caused the dam to actually fail. And all those tailings flowed into the San Juan River and turned it yellow for a period of months, killed all the fish, got into two other streams downstream. And it was just a major environmental catastrophe caused by the Environmental Protection Agency. And you know, these energy minerals, that's what people don't understand about this transition. You know, you just see these 30-second ads on TV about how beautiful the future is going to be with all these windmills and solar
Electric
panels covering up
vehicles.
all the farmland, and yeah, we're all going to starve, but we'll have solar power. And it's people don't understand that those industries and electric vehicles are hugely dependent, you know, on this wide array of energy minerals: copper, nickel, lithium, antimony, cobalt, tungsten. The list goes on and on and on. And it all has to be mined. It's all hard rock mining, highly invasive, highly impactful. And I interviewed some folks from SBC Global who have done a recent study on the copper situation just yesterday. And they said, just where copper is concerned, for the United States to reach its Biden's goal on transitioning, we're going to have to somehow open and build 3 new major copper mines every year through 2040 in the United States. That's not going to happen.
It's impossible, yeah.
No, I mean, we'll be lucky if there's 3 permitted across those 18 years in the United States. People don't want those mining operations anywhere close to them.
Of course not.
But you know, the mining operations, yes, they do everything they can to not cause major harm to the environment, but by their very nature, they are incredibly impactful to the environment. In the United States, because of our social movement and attitudes in this country, in Europe as well, got out of the mining business, the hard rock mining business in the 80s, and willingly turned all of that over to China mainly, but also other developing nations around the world, because we didn't want it in our backyard. And now there's this conceit among these industries and the politicians whose campaigns they fund, frankly, that somehow we're going to go right back to mining again. And I just have to tell them that is not going to happen. So we're seeing this train wreck right now where oil supply is concerned, but our world is about to have an enormous series of train wrecks where the supplies of all these others, this wide array of energy minerals is concerned, and nobody wants to talk about it or do anything real to avoid it. And because it's too politically inconvenient for them. So they just pass $700 billion spending bills and pretend to be doing something about it. And it's not going to work out well for us.
Yeah. Going to our last point today, more than half natural gas production from the US is from shale gas. And of course, not a problem for the US in terms of production capacity to keep sending natural gas via LNG to Europe. But uncertainties are related to good relationships between them, prices, and internal priorities of the US. So what do you think, David, in terms of, let's see, stability to send LNG and NG to Europe for a long time?
Well, I mean, you're right. The supply is certainly there. The amount of natural gas in these shale formations is almost incomprehensible how big it is. The Eagle Ford Shale alone is the amount of dry natural gas in the Eagle Ford Shale is stunning. And the assessments you see are all based on proven reserves. And that means, you know, it's a very technical exercise, and it's incredibly understating of the true scale of the resource. I mean, we haven't really even begun to develop the biggest part of that natural gas resource in the Eagle Ford Shale yet. So those volumes don't even get talked about. So that's there, but the infrastructure is going to have to expand massively and rapidly in terms of pipelines and LNG export facility capacity and ships. I mean, the part of it people tend to forget about is we're going to need a lot more LNG tankers.
Yeah.
And that don't exist today and take years to build and billions of dollars in cost, and where all that capital is going to come from. You know, this is all against the ESG philosophy and the climate change propaganda. And so we you know, it's going to again be just another area of where reality clashes with the fantasy. And how that all shakes out is going to depend on the willpower of the politicians who control the policy. And, you know, we've seen how much willpower those politicians in either party really have. And it's not a lot. So it's, you know, I've said it repeatedly, I don't think the United States, that Europe should be relying on the United States as its main trading partner for LNG, because I don't believe we're very reliable.
Irina, changing the dependence from Russia to United States now by the natural gas. How Europeans?
Apparently, as David noted, that's not very smart. Not because the US doesn't want to sell more LNG to Europe, but because it cannot sell a lot more LNG to Europe right now, and it will take years and years and years to be able to do that. But the problem of Europe is that it keeps putting all its eggs in one basket. It now it's trying now to put all its eggs in the US LNG basket, which is impossible because they'll break for the reasons David noted. And it cannot really rely on the Middle East, because the Middle East, specifically Qatar, wants long-term contracts, and Germany doesn't want to sign long-term contracts for LNG deliveries because it's not green. It goes directly against the ESG, the energy transition grain. So now I imagine they're squirming what to do. I heard they're trying to revive a project for a gas pipeline from the Iberian Peninsula, from Spain to the mainland, to the continent, to bring gas from Northern Africa to more remote countries, you know, beyond Spain. Again, this project was shelved a while ago, I assume because of the energy transition push. And I expect it will take a while to build this pipeline. Actually, when I read the news report, I laughed out loud because, you know, Gazprom just built Nord Stream 2, and the German government, you know, partially funded that. Well, not the government personally, but yeah.
I had the same reaction to that story.
And Nord Stream 2 is bad. It's a stranded asset. And now you're talking about another gas pipeline to bring gas from North Africa, notoriously politically unstable parts of the world, unfortunately, where Morocco and Algeria, it's probably Algerian gas because Algeria is a big producer, but they are now fighting over something or other. And recently, deliveries of natural gas from Algeria via pipeline to Europe that passes through Morocco were suspended, they were disrupted. So really, what is Europe doing? I don't think European politicians actually know what they're doing, but I suspect they think they know, and they keep hoping that it will turn out for the best. But I highly doubt it. If they started, you know, mentioning the word blackouts and energy rationing, things are not going well.
But Olaf Scholz told the German people yesterday to count on us to solve all these problems.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure they all believed him. It will actually be sad if someone believes him, but
I can't imagine anyone believes him, but I
Yeah.
don't live there, so I don't know.
yeah, neither
They-
do I. I know people in the Germany, those who can are stocking up on, whatever they can.
They love spend money constructing pipelines.
And
Well,
then,
yeah, they seem to, yeah.
and then turning them into stranded assets, because again, this pipeline should be a long-term project. I mean, you only build it once, but you don't build it so it can transport gas for 5 years. You build
At
it so it
least.
can transport gas for many years. So
Sure.
it's long-term and includes
20 years.
the word gas.
Yeah.
So that's bad. That's not transitionary. So
No problem.
really,
Yeah, I mean, how many mountain ranges will that pipeline have to
that's a good
overcome?
question. Geography is not my strongest
Yeah,
subject, but there are some mountains there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just it's a, you can do it. You can do it. I mean, we've done it in the United States, built pipelines, hundreds of pipelines over mountain ranges. But the thought that that's any sort of solution to the current problem
Yeah.
is mind-boggling. That's, as Armando said, it's a 20-year project
Yeah.
just to get the final investment decision made is probably 5 years before you can even source the capital to build the thing.
And you need to be sure that Algeria has the capacity to supply these additional volumes of gas. And
Right.
I don't see this mentioned in the plans yet. So
It's
There's
just,
that.
it's a crazy idea that, is born of desperation. And I shouldn't
Yeah.
laugh as much about it as I do, I guess. But
we should.
it's
They're
just,
idiots. We should laugh at them.
well, yeah. And it's, what it gets back to, and I know I repeat myself a lot on this show, but it gets back to the reality that we just have the wrong class of people making all these decisions. for us.
Decisions. Sure.
It just, they don't know anything about it. They have unrealistic expectations. They're motivated by the wrong motivations, money and politics. And people like Mr. Schultz and Antonio Guterres at the United Nations, and Fatih Birol and John Kerry and Al Gore, they're all part of this elite globalist political class that, their lives aren't impacted by the horrible outcomes that their decisions create.
Yeah. That's
The
right.
people who are impacted are in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and the middle of Africa and South America, in developing nations, in Asia. My gosh. And those are the people who are going to pay the real price for all this, not the people making the decisions. And there just has to be, at some point, we're going to have to come up with a better way of making the decisions in the first place. Or we're just going to end in absolute catastrophe because these people don't know what they're doing and they shouldn't be in charge of anything.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for this fantastic conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Got me all riled up here. Now I can go on vacation. I'll see y'all when I get back.
Yeah,
Good vacation.
get
Good
good
week.
rest.
Thank you. Have a good
Have a
weekend.
good week. You
You
too.
too.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.